My name is Pallavi Shah. I'm a senior vice president at a company called Blackstone IP, which is just down the street from here. We are a boutique investment bank with a focus on valuing and trading intellectual properties and technologies for our clients. And we are slightly different than the traditional investment banks in the sense that we focus more on the intellectual property and technology for the valuation as opposed to just the overall businesses. So our main focus is really on intellectual property and patents. Before joining Blackstone, I was at HP. I was heading the patent sales at HP, and before that I was at Sun Labs, Sun Microsystems, and before that I was at SRI, Stanford Research Institute. So my research and my areas of focus has always been scaling the internet or big data, content management over the internet. And I'm really excited to be on the panel with a lot of experts and investors in this field, and looking forward to a great discussion.
Yoon?
Hi, my name is Yoon Choi. I'm with SAIC Capital. SAIC Capital is a venture fund launched by Shanghai Motor. We are based in Menlo Park. Of course, Shanghai Motor is in Shanghai. Is one of the biggest Chinese car OEM with annual revenue of 105 billion. So yeah, we want to invest in innovative technology companies in automotive space. The size of the fund is $100 million, but we've already deployed about 40% of $100 million within a year. So we've been very active in venture investment.
Right.
Ryan Begley, I'm a product manager at IBM, hopefully a company everyone's heard of before. So I won't describe IBM. Within the Internet of Things business unit, and I cover our electronics industry offerings.
Okay. Well, I think the first question we're gonna get into, and it's kind of an interesting question, and that is, what does an investor look for in the hardware business? And I think it's an interesting question because I personally don't think there's any value in IoT hardware. I think where the value is not in the hardware, it's in the data that it extracts and then transforming that data into something of use. But you know, heck, that's my opinion. Why don't we walk our way down to the question? So what does an investor look for in the hardware business?
So from our client's perspective, I see a lot of action or activities in the intellectual property part. And main reason is that, and some of you might be familiar with it, that software patents, there was a lot of controversy around the value of software patents. For two reasons, AIA, America Invents Act, changed the whole landscape of how much companies can charge for patent license. And the second thing that recently happened was Alice versus Alice Bank lawsuit. So basically, what that meant was if the patent claims are very broad, it's like it's not a new invention, it's just in your head. Unless you have something to really show, it's not of much value. So there is a lot of movement towards filing and acquiring patents in the hardware IP. And lots of examples, you've heard Samsung spend several hundreds of millions of dollars acquiring 21 patents, just in the hardware space. So there's a lot. I also see a lot of activities in the sensors, not just from the IP point of view, but also from cheaper hardware for that. And the back end, and my panelists would have a lot more to talk about it, but a lot of cloud security and cloud gateways and hubs. There's a lot more investment happening in those spaces, mainly because the trend is changing. The old architectures are not going to scale for the kind of billions of transactions we are looking at on the internet. And that obviously means that there's going to be a big change in the hardware. And I'll let my other panelists to talk about more about their view on the hardware.
From investment in hardware is definitely becoming more and more tricky. because we eventually look at how much money we can make from the investment, and if we don't see bigger return in hardware investment, we would definitely kind of shy away from it. That is true though, but I think that hardware platform is a very important. Where do you see the innovation in hardware these days is that if you want to actually build hardware, you need some sort of like differentiation. Like, do you actually address the efficiency, cost saving, efficiency built into your hardware? And me coming from hardware background, from mobility to automotive, hardware platform is very, very important. In a way, is a key foundation of the whole ecosystem of IoT. And big companies having hard time to invest in any hardware side from component side. If we don't make money, we are going to wait until we see more disruptive way of building hardwares. So I think that we are still looking at startup companies that are bringing some sort of solution exactly to address how much money you can save. And also another trend is really in an integration side. Hardware, you have hardware and how you can save money by adding another sort of layer in the stack, or you're adding more sort of features and functionalities in hardware to actually run it on run it more lighter. So I think that there's definitely hardware players out there on IoT side that can be invested, and some of companies that we are looking at. I'm looking at hardware companies as well, but definitely you need to add a system level of expertise to hardware.
You made a great point. I think traditionally we've been of the opinion that there is no value in hardware. It's been very much a race to the bottom, who can deliver hardware services at the cheapest price. Differentiation is certainly, I think, the key to expanding the market and getting into new industries. It's really about differentiation. It's about how can you really capture a specific industry or a specific service. Edge analytics is a great example. Those hardware manufacturers that are adding additional computational features and being able to perform analytics at the edge. This is an exploding marketplace. And then I also think the non-traditional hardware components that are being digitized through the Internet of Things, smart sprinklers, these type of things that traditionally they were just analog devices that had no real intelligence. They're being digitized, and I think as a result, you're seeing an explosion of investment in those areas. So, from an IBM perspective, we're not getting the smart sprinkler business by any means, but certainly we're making investments and partnering with a number of companies that are doing innovative things on the network, performing edge analytics, edge processing, and so forth. Because as the Internet of Things grows, the network architecture simply can't handle 100 billion devices. So there's going to have to be a number of innovative approaches to restructuring the network topology.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at it from an investor point of view, where are you going to look? Numbers. So Gartner recently put out the report, and I think everybody here has heard the numbers in terms of number of things. This is the Internet of Things. Who's winning the battle on this one? I think McKinsey actually ended up winning the value in terms of value, but 50 billion things, 30 billion things, 20 billion things. So if you look at it that way, embedded systems, right? There's going to be volume in embedded systems, so investors are bullish on that. But I guess my point I'm trying to make, and we'll use the sprinkler as an example, an IoT sprinkler, the value you get from an IoT sprinkler, so I don't want to discourage anyone who's developing hardware. I guess more my point I want to make is that when you're developing your hardware, it's a means to an end. It's not the hardware that somebody wants. Someone doesn't want an IoT sprinkler because I've got a really good sprinkler that I just bought for like $20. What they want is the information that can come from that IoT sprinkler or the way the IoT sprinkler uses that information. So the advice, I think, at least from my personal point of view, is that if you're developing a hardware product, that's awesome, but it's a vehicle. It's a vehicle to an end, and so where you want to put in your energy is going to be in the software and the analytics, so analyzing that data.
And there's also this notion of ecosystem, right? So it's not necessarily the sprinkler itself, but it's the broader ecosystem that the sprinkler exists in. Is it connected to other things? Is there a level of orchestration that goes on within the sprinkler ecosystem connected to your car? Or that's really at the consumer level, but if you think about, smarter agriculture, right? These are where the real opportunities are, because agriculture is an industry that's remained largely unchanged over the last 100 years. There's chemicals and there's fertilizer advancements and so forth, but the automation and the orchestration components that smart sprinklers enable, these are where the opportunities, I think, are for an investment and for growth.
All right, well, let's move on to the second question, and this one actually has a couple different angles too. How important are consumer-led trends when you make an investment? And Yoon, I'd like to start with you actually. Can you start us off on how important are consumer-led trends?
I would say it's very important, right? If you look at when you start using smartphones, when smartphone first came out with the keystrokes, all of that, and you didn't know how inconvenient that was before iPhone came out with the touch screen, right? All of a sudden, the market adoption for the touch screen was just went ballistic, and everybody was like, I need to have this. It's so convenient. And then even you go to your laptop, you're like, oh, why is it not moving, right? So it's just usability really pushes consumer to adopt things. And then if you look at cars, for instance, you're using or even understand half of the car dashboard is so challenging. Maybe I know the fuel gauge, I know where radio is, but the rest of it, I'm like, oh, I don't know. I just turn on my phone for the GPS and all of that. So there was no innovation whatsoever inside the car. And then car OEMs blindly collect all these data from roads, from the cars, and from drivers. We don't know what to do with it. And there was no great user interface. There was no consumer sort of driven sort of design within the car. So now car OEMs competing with highly non-traditional sort of players like Google, even Uber, Tesla, and all these guys who are so much closer to reading consumer trends and actually adopting what the trends out there into the cars. We as a car OEMs wow, we need to really make difference here, or we're gonna lose market share. Right? So there's definitely this sort of sense of urgency from car guys to actually reflect what drivers or consumers want in the cars. Actually, it's not that, it's pretty straightforward, but we haven't done it so far. So yeah, it is very important. That's what I'm looking at from my sort of investment angles, how I'm going to build my portfolio. That's exactly where it goes. Okay, all this data that we are collecting from cars, where is it gonna? How does this benefit consumers down the road? Cars understand you. Cars understand basically drivers. Oh, okay, drivers. I saw it from your calendar that you have a meeting in San Francisco today, and I will give you where you can park and then where you can stop by at nearest Starbucks to get a coffee before your meeting starts. So all of a sudden, cars understand me, and then the user interface is so seamless. I think that that's that's like really the key sort of things
So
that
is
we're
your
looking at.
advice, so I mean, I think what we're looking for is advice for the audience here, and maybe another way to pose the question is, should developers and makers be looking at what's trendy? Or, you know, one of my heroes, since I'm Canadian, is Wayne Gretzky, and he always said, the reason I'm successful is because I don't go where the puck is, I go where the puck is going to be. And so from an investor's point of view, are you suggesting that people in this room develop and modify their products to what's trendy today, or not? I guess that's really, maybe that's my question anyway.
I guess there's a short-term trend and long-term trend, right? And then what is possible in a short term, and then what is possible in long term, right? So I'm looking at what we can be, what can we done like today versus tomorrow. There's some dynamics here within automotive sector. It's not that straightforward for you develop something today and then you'll see that next year. No, it's pretty much taking 3 to 5 years for your ideas to get into the car space, right? It's not like a handset where you have like year development cycle to launch. So if you're looking at mobility market and then moving to automotive, it is a short-term, long-term. Like the trend today, like Uber, for instance, they're buying companies right and left. Whenever the car companies, whenever startups mentions autonomous driving, and so trend seems to be autonomous driving today. Autonomous connected car is really the buzzword in my space these days, but like. Is short-term trend or is long-term? It's a short-term trend because everybody's been talking about this for like past couple of years, but in terms of enabling that would take much longer, right? You're looking at technologies is there, but like with these different dynamics between government, policies, and liabilities and all of that. It's just, there are a lot of players in the mix, so you have to factor that in. Okay, it's going to be the trend, but can I sustain my operation by 2020? Right.
So I think what you're saying then, and Ryan, I'm going to ask your opinion. I think what you're saying is trends are good to get on your radar, but you're going to analyze them to see if it's a short-term trend or a longer-term trend.
Yeah, I think that trends from an enterprise perspective really serve the purpose of educating the marketplace, socializing the marketplace to a specific technology. I mean, Facebook is a great example for how everyone's sort of given up their privacy to a certain extent. Wearables are kind of the next evolution of that, right? So now everyone knows where you are, how active or inactive you are. And as people become more used to this level of intrusion or data gathering, whatever your opinion is, then the use cases can then be extended further and further. So, you know, social is certainly a technology that's in the enterprise space. You know, Salesforce has a whole social platform. Every company is using social to a certain extent to coordinate, to collaborate internally. I think you're going to see wearables the same thing, right? Wearables are going to start tracking employee efficiency. I think, you know, where you are at any certain time. I know Amazon does this already, right? So the consumer trend of the wearable enables the enterprise to begin to leverage and take advantage and capture that value that's been created through the Fitbits and the Jawbones and you know, all the different players that are there. So yeah. I think that's...
So what you're saying, which is interesting, is you're saying trends are defining, I guess, the what's acceptable and kind of the modus operandi of using privacy as an example. You look at trends because they're defining what is socially acceptable for this type of a product or for this type of a use case. Is that what you're saying?
I definitely think that it's a big part of it. I mean, if people are used to certain communicating in certain ways, social is a good example, Enterprises want to kind of get in that game and be able to deliver that same sort of service at the workplace. There's really, the line between work and non-work is blurred, right? So you want that continuity between your job and your personal life, and I think that you're going to continue to see that as the Internet of Things evolves. The services that we're able to get through the emergence of the Internet of Things are going to be delivered into your workplace. There's really no question.
Well, I want to go to I guess $1 million question. This is multidimensional, and I guess you can answer it, and it's more almost like I guess an opinion piece. But what are the key opportunities in the IoT market today? And Pallavi, I want to start with you. But what are the key opportunities? And I'm talking from an investment point of view. And obviously, your investment perspective is going to be looking at intellectual property. But I'd like to go through the line and just see, at least opinion of the panel, where are the key opportunities?
So the key opportunities that our clients are seeing are definitely big data, and that's because it's all these enablers are great, but really what matters is how can you monetize that, all that innovation. Just making your life easy doesn't help the large businesses much, right? You're not going to pay a whole lot for those services, or most likely you're going to ask those services for free. So it's always about gathering that data, big data, and analyzing it, making sense of it, and monetizing it. So in our company, we say it's 1B and 4 S's, so that one big data, and then 4, the biggest one is security. I mean, we can talk about all of these enablers, but I will not put my child in a connected car if I know that it's very easy to hack it. So that plus privacy, that goes hand in hand. The second one is scalability. We're looking at these numbers, like 200 billions, tiny transactions, and by transactions I just mean internet transactions, not monetary transactions, happening on the internet. How is that going to get scaled? And the demand for that speed is going to go up. In the past, we were okay with receiving an email 2 hours late, but now we want it instantaneously. Now with IoT, I'm willing to wait 2 minutes to know where my car is, on that OnStar. But eventually, I would want my car to do things, and that 2 minutes is going to be way too long. So all that infrastructure that we call scalability, that's another area where there's lot of opportunities. The third one is sensors. Obviously, everybody knows that, it's the endpoints. And the speed, the scalability and speed go hand in hand, but those are the 4 areas where we see a lot more investment opportunities, and those are very difficult problems to solve.
And again, just to put a finer point on it, though, this is the investment opportunities from an intellectual property investment, right?
It's both, because the companies are not just investing in IP. They see investment in IP is actually a good indicator of where companies are planning to build their products. And when I hear companies wanting sensor technology or sensor IP or wearables IP, we know they're very serious. They have products coming out in the market, and these are large companies. So there's definitely momentum. Apples and Googles of the world are going to shape it in the future. So I see those as really standard, irrespective of intellectual property.
Okay. Ryan, what's your take on this?
It's if I knew the answer to this, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. I think I approach it from two angles. One, there are specific industries which are very, like big agriculture is one, but specific industries that are very ripe to benefit from the digitization of the physical world, right? There's tremendous capacity that's locked up in these office buildings. And if you're able to actually understand the utilization rates, then you can begin to unlock that capacity, much like the Uber example, right? An Uber for office buildings, right? This is something that's incredible. It's totally possible right now. Just the models haven't evolved at that point.
What is that one?
I'm sorry?
What is it you were just saying?
Like the Uberification of office space or public space.
But isn't that Airbnb sort of?
That's so of course, but for offices, right? So think about how much space in San Francisco is unused right now. That's a service that's ready to be delivered, if we're able to determine, the people flow and how the utilization rates and connect the buyers to the sellers, right? These are all things that are entirely possible, and it's not just office space. It's virtually anything, right? And it doesn't have to be the Uber concept. It's really just about digitizing and then understanding utilization, and then you can justify based upon lease rates in shopping malls, right? You can justify lease rates enhanced or decreased if you understand foot traffic at a better level. I think the second area where the opportunity is these non-conventional partnerships. Industries are really converging. Auto, what's to prevent auto from starting to write their own auto insurance policies, right? They know what drivers are doing. If you're able to collect certain levels of data, you can begin to write your own actuary tables. That's something that's totally possible. I have no idea if the auto industry wants to get into the insurance business. Probably not, right? Because it's not their specialty. But it's something that is plausible because of this. So, when you think about where the opportunities are, it's like creativity is incredibly important. I actually read this week, and this might be a company that's in San Francisco somewhere, but a smart magnet that you can scan food, and they've connected a service with Kroger. So you have a mobile app, and you hit a buy button, and everything, all the food that you've scanned in your refrigerator as you've thrown it away, curbside delivery the next day. That's innovative. It's not that innovative, but it's a huge value add, and personally, I would sign up for that. So these non-conventional partnerships, a magnet company partnering with a supermarket, right? So,
Yoon, what are you thinking?
Yeah, so where are the key opportunities? I think the key opportunity, my pain is basically your opportunity, very simply put. For us, sensors, pretty much you summarize all the areas that we will be looking in this space. But like sensors, from car OEM's perspective, we can keep adding all these sensors, the front, rear, side, tons of sensors. But how can we make money by adding all these sensors? So we have to come up with sensors and data fusing together to come up with the result that we're looking for. So the number of sensors has to be reduced, or each sensor could function much more powerfully. And then we see data as sensors, also big data that you're either is crowdsourcing or either is data that we read from sensors or from a satellite. All these wireless network, all these sensors. So what is a sort of fusion, sensor fusion coming from? And then also the network that you're building around sensors. So all of these things are very, very important, and we don't actually have that core technology today as a car OEMs. So these are the areas that we'll be looking at if you ask me what is hardware side investment on sensor most specifically, and also big data. We are collecting data from all these sensors and processing all this, investing gazillions of money in building infrastructure, cloud service and all of that, but we don't know how to exactly monetize, extract value from these big data. So that covers sort of data analytics. You mentioned about unconventional partnership. We are working with all these service providers, even let's say Spotify. Have you Spotify
car,
and for the all the different type of partners. And if you can kind of identify what is exactly how you can help us to solve this pain of having no DNA in service, value extraction, data analytics, and through machine learning. How do we process this gazillion amount of data? So basically, you come up with a data set that tells you, that triggers you to actually pay money, and I pay money, and then I save money. For instance, like I drive my car. I have car OEM has a sort of partnership with the Shell, and then this function in my car tells me, oh, you are driving to San Francisco, and you're not going to make it with the gas that you have in your car now. So you have to go to gas station. The nearest, let's say I have a partnership with the Shell. Nearest Shell gas station is, let's say, 10 miles away from here. And then I go there, and then I don't even have to get out of my car. My car understands Shell gas communicates with a Shell gas station, and I save money. So why am I not going to I pay, let's say, a subscription fee for that service? For instance, there are a lot of neat ideas actually that can benefit us, and then we're talking to like this machine learning or data analytics companies. So that's one area. Of course, there are other areas that we are interested, but probably not IoT relevant.
Yeah, I mean, I think my perspective is if we squint our eyes into what everyone's been saying, again, it's this information. You know, it's the Shell, you know, gas station in the car. It's having that information. The agriculture, it's knowing, you know, what extra information. And so, you know, if you look at it from a functional point of view, the three areas where you're creating value is how you're creating this information. Data analytics, you know, a couple of the presentations that were earlier today, I think are spot on. That is a value generator, is looking at that data and trying to drive some information out of it. Something we haven't spoken about that much is the model and the software application. So what are you modeling, whether that is going to be you know, an agriculture system, what is the value model that you're creating, what's the application you put around there? I think those are the functional areas. And then if you look at it from a market point of view, of course, everyone's going to have their, you know, they're going to have their favorite particular, you know, market segment of where it is. Now, security, and I'm not sure how much time we have here, but security is a bit of a ball of or a ball of strings or a ball of wax. I don't know if that works that well, but it's a difficult one. It's because everybody in the market understands or realizes that they need it. However, nobody wants to pay for it. And that includes the consumer doesn't want to pay for it because they'll much rather have convenience, or they'll much rather have extra functionality, a blue bell, rather than having security. But it's a big known. So from an investment point of view, what do you do there? Because right now, people aren't really demanding it, and so product managers, for example, are certainly not going to put that on the top of their, you know, their feature list. However, it is a huge problem. So from an investor point of view, how do you kind of reconcile, you know, there's going to be a need, but nobody wants it right now. So what do you do there?
So from intellectual property point of view, I can give you examples of these credit card companies, you know, Visa and MasterCard and everybody getting together and coming up with EMV initiative, which is the merchants and retailers and banks and all of them have to comply with that security. And if they do that, and if they get the certification, they have to pay 2% instead of 3% to the credit card company, you know, for each transaction. So why would they do that? Because the money that these credit card companies were losing because of fraud was much, much higher. And they were the ones who were suffering, right? I mean, most of the consumers are saying, my life is an open book, let them track me. Eventually, something big is going to happen and somebody is going to pay for it. And most likely, those are the back-end people, you know, back-end large companies. And they are the ones they have to put together something to protect themselves for such disasters. So that's one example where they're incentivizing people or companies to use the security to pay less. That's one example. And of course, you know, mission critical applications, you know, nobody's going to trust, you know, I don't think those cars are going to run without any security confirmation. So there's always that too, you know, safety point of view and other things.
Yoon, would you invest in a security-based company now, or is it?
Oh
maybe
yeah,
too
yeah,
soon?
definitely.
Yeah?
It's very, very important. As you can, you hear every day, like there are army of hackers around the world trying to hack car systems day in, day out.
But no one's paying for it, though. That's kind of what I'm trying to say. Is yeah, it's a big problem, but no one's paying for it.
It is.
And no one wants to pay for it. So, but you still saying you would invest in it?
Yeah, yeah. Why? Because car industry is very different from a mobility handset because there's recall, right? This huge liability is a huge dent to the car OEM's reputation and also finance, right? So if anything related to safety and security for us is directly connected to safety of a driver. Having said that, cybersecurity today is really the key sort of area that we are investing today because we have motivation, incentive.
Safety. Ryan, any last thoughts?
Security is huge, and it will continue to get even more and more significant. I mean, you're talking about 50 billion endpoints that can all be spoofed. They're all entry points into a personal ecosystem of Internet of Things devices. It is, I mean, the dust has not settled on this one at all. And if it had, I mean, you wouldn't be reading about it every day, right? So there's no real silver bullet. And it's a problem that's going to continue to evolve. And that's what's so interesting about it. And that's why it's such a dynamic investment opportunity. If I was an investor, certainly that's where I would be looking because it absolutely, with each couple of years, the wall comes down a little bit, and the attackers can jump right over, right? So it's an incredibly complex opportunity that, if solved or even if partially solved, it's likely to be very profitable.
Do we have time for questions? Or? Not really. Not really. Okay, we overstayed our welcome. Well, anyway, let's thank the panelists and thank you.
Thank you.